How are you? Wie geht's dir? Как вы? Hur du? Como vai? Jak se máš? ¿Cómo estás? Hi everyone. In today's video, I would like to share my experience and techniques and tactics on how to master any language you decide to learn. And people often tell me, Lenka, but languages are so difficult to learn. And I'm always saying, no, believe me, languages are not difficult at all if you know the right techniques and if you're fully dedicated to learn. First of all, let me tell you my personal story. So I started with English and German in the primary school when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And until I was 18, I was constantly one of the worst in languages. I was barely passing my exams and I just didn't enjoy the process of learning languages. I don't know, how is the learning journey like in your countries? Guys, let me know in the comment. Because in the Czech Republic, the only thing we study in the school is the grammar. And if you fail in the grammar, the teachers give you the impression, oh, you cannot go out and practice unless you know all the grammar rules. So what happens is that students are so afraid to use the language, they never practice, and they are even very ashamed of the knowledge they already have. So even very young people like my age, from my country, Czech Republic, they often don't speak any foreign language, which is crazy, right? In nowadays globalized world. So I was also very frustrated about learning languages. I was like, nah, come on. Like, there is always this grammar and it was so boring. But I was lucky enough that my mom was always telling me, Lenka, languages is the most important thing you should learn. Everything else you can learn later, but languages will set solid foundation for you and for your future. If you know English, if you know German, and maybe other languages, you will be unbeatable in the world and in the industry. And I'm so happy that I had the support from the early age, but also I'm so happy that I was so dedicated to learn the languages because no one else can do this for you. I often see students getting private classes 3 times a week, but even if you do this, and it's amazing, the tutor cannot do that for you. You're the only single person responsible for mastering any language. It's the same like with gym, right? There are no shortcuts. Even though I would say learning language is way easier than building muscles. So I will give you and I will share with you my techniques, my tips, what has helped me and what has helped me to learn German, English, Spanish, and a little bit of Russian, Swedish, and Portuguese. I didn't pay so much attention to those last 3 languages, but I know if I would be dedicated, I would master them within a couple of weeks or months. So the most important thing is if you decide, let's say now I want to learn Spanish. Spanish is my language number 1. You need to immerse yourself in everything what has to do and everything what is related to Spanish. So first of all, I would switch my phone into Spanish immediately. I would become part of Spanish communities, either online or offline. I would start searching for all the materials like music and books which are in Spanish. But let's say that you have no knowledge, you have 0 knowledge of Spanish, so how could you actually read a book fully written in Spanish? First of all, let me explain you how we actually learn languages. There are 2 ways, they're passive and active. And the same way as if you're going to write a language test, there will be at least 4 categories: listening, writing, speaking, and reading. And the passive one are listening and reading. This is something what comes from external place toward us. And this is way easier than the active one, which is writing and speaking, which comes from us. Both parts are equally important, just the passive, it's easier. Sometimes it might happen to you that people talk to you and you don't even know the exact translation of such term, but you just know what they mean. It has a lot to do also with the body language. However, starting practicing the active knowledge of the language is very important and try to use it as soon as possible. In my opinion, the speaking is equally important, but also a little bit more important than writing. Sometimes writing takes too much time. However, if you know how the words are written, if you know the structure of some sentences and so on, this will help you immensely in the speaking and in the other parts of language as well. But if you have, like, you don't know any vocabulary, then it's very helpful and very easy to write a list of at least 30 to 50 verbs, which are the most important ones. Like I eat, I sleep, I want, I see, I hear, I go. And then learn also the negative form. I don't go, he doesn't go, he doesn't want, and so on. And now, like, you will cover basically the most common activities in a daily life. Then also learn the pronouns, and as soon as you master the pronouns and the verbs, you can start adding some other adverbs, for example, adverbs or adjectives like a lot, a little, nicely, badly, and so on. And then suddenly you can already describe something like she wants, and then you will add some objects. She wants this nice car, for example. And doesn't matter if it's not in the right form. We know that English is quite easy in the sense in comparison, let's say, to German, which has way more complex structure and grammar. But it doesn't matter. At the beginning, you should speak with all mistakes, but important is to express yourself, because over time you will be clearing out and you will be getting better in the grammar. But it's important to get rid of this fear of making mistakes. It's also good to not stay in those mistakes for too long, but it's still way better to speak with mistakes than don't speak at all. And then I would suggest you to switch your phone into Spanish immediately and start surrounding yourself with everything what has to do with Spanish. Spanish communities, Spanish culture, also getting the idea about history, everything what has to do with that language. If you're a beginner, I also recommend you to invest at the beginning into some private tutor or at least a group which has some native speaker in it. If you don't have the finances, of course, you can go the other way around with some language apps, but at the beginning, I find it quite important to set some solid foundation, at least for the A1 level. And this one can be even once a week, but it's good to have someone accountable who will control and double check some of your homeworks and tasks and so on. But make sure that you will find some exciting tutor which makes you fall in love even more in that language. Because sometimes I've noticed that some tutors are very old-fashioned and they are all about the grammar, as I mentioned, and this will discourage you from learning the language, and this is something what we don't want. When I talked about the study groups, then in the study group you can also find some partner which will help you, accountability partner which will help you with the language. You can also find a love partner or like a good friend who speak in that language fluently, and you can talk to each other over a cup of coffee or a lunch, and this will help you to stay in touch with that language. I mentioned the language apps. I would say the Duolingo is very, very famous nowadays. It's for free and it gives you those notifications like you have not completed this yet, etc. However, I'm not such a big fan of those apps, but I know that some of you guys are very happy with Duolingo, so if you like it, go for it. I actually used some course on Udemy when I was learning basic of French, and this helped me a lot. I would suggest searching on Udemy as well, or Skillshare. And on Udemy you find like rating of how many people took that course and how was it, and in my opinion this is good indicator that the course will be helpful. And then, as I mentioned, immersing in that language means reading materials, watching movies, TV show, listening to podcasts, listening to music, literally everything what has to do with that language. And no, doesn't matter that at the beginning you don't understand, but as long as you're exposed to that, it's like 3 months you don't understand anything, and then suddenly you feel like you can have a solid conversation. So it's important to don't give up and just be every single day presented and be dedicated to learning that language. What has helped me a lot was also to pick newspapers, the written newspapers with like very, I would say, not high quality of the material which was inside. It was all about the celebrities and gossiping, but it was so easy to get through this information, and there were so many adjectives and over exaggeration, like very much or so little and so, and it was very easy for me to read it. So this was one of my techniques. I also purchased a book on grammar back then, and I just learned on my own every single day for at least an hour to get some solid foundation. And I know this sounds boring, and I'm also not a fan of such books and grammar, but this is something it's like an airplane. Actually, the flying is quite easy, but what is the most dangerous part and the hardest one is the takeoff and landing. And the same happens with languages. Like the takeoff is so difficult to absorb so many information and so many words, but then it's quite easy to navigate as you're having the conversation, I would say. As soon as you will get to some certain point, then it's quite easy, and the only thing what it then requires is to maintain the flight, maintain the level of language. Also, what I did when I was studying languages was I kept my journal, not only to celebrate milestones and see my progress, but also I was writing in that language my journal, which was quite funny, and it was very helpful because what I was going through in a day was something usually we do very similar things over and over. Today I woke up, today I had a breakfast, today I met with my friend, today I went to school, and so on. And if you learn to write those things well, and you will repeat it sometimes over and over, this will help you so much, not only to know those things, but for the first phase to have the confidence to talk about some basic stuff and have some basic conversation. It's also very important to stay curious and really like and love the language. So pick the language not just because it's important for your career. Pick the language because it passionates you, it makes you excited. That's why I love Spanish, because I love the music, I love reggaeton, I love salsa, I love cumbia, I love the culture of South America and Spain. And it's just like, I am so excited just to think about Spain or Colombia, that like this excitement with language comes along. So staying curious, staying excited is, well, I would say, a secret sauce to mastering a language. And of course, I can tell you that use the flashcards, those little tiny cards where on one side you write something like in that language in Spanish, and on the other side you write the translation. I'm not a big fan of translations because I always feel that they keep you attached to your mother tongue, and it's important to completely switch our brain to the language we want to learn. But in the first phase, it's very good. I also recommend that if you're at home and you see a table, you see a bed, you see a phone, that you're just thinking, okay, how to say this in that language, how to say this in Spanish, how to say this in German, and so on, and just Googling. Nowadays, we have Google all the time, so use it for this good purpose and just regularly double check the meanings of some words. And I would say the last thing I mentioned is to celebrate your milestones, but also practice regularly and be patient. Because it's like with everything, we sometimes see someone has an overnight success, but in fact there was a lot of dedication, a lot of time and energy put toward that goal, and the same applies to languages. But I would say languages are so much fun that they will open you so many doors you cannot even imagine, not only career-wise, but it will also open the hearts of people, friendships, and so many opportunities. That learning languages, oh my God, I would say it's my one of my biggest hobbies, to learn languages and to see how people think in different cultures. So I hope this video was helpful. As I mentioned, those are techniques and tips I personally verified with learning many languages on a fluent and professional level. So let me know what languages are you learning and what are you struggling with, and see you in the next video.